This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all that news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. Episode 162, live from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Met fans everywhere. Two games to determine the fate of the New York Mets. Got 3 teams, 2 wild card spots left. And the Mets, all they have to do is win one game, just one, whether it's the first game or the second game of this doubleheader coming up Monday afternoon. Here to join me on this show today, a good friend to the program, and you know him very well. My man, Tyler Ward, a.k.a. Wardy NYM, one of the best Mets content creator, if not the best Mets content creator out there right now. Wardy, my friend, are you calm? Are you good? You breathing a little bit? Are we good now?
Let me turn it back to you, Anthony, as someone who knows what I do on a nightly basis. Do I look okay, all things considered? I feel like I'm doing all right. You know, it could be a lot worse. I could be a lot more anxious. I know it's going to come throughout the night. As I was saying in my post-game coverage, you know, I feel like I'm going to be my newborn son Shea tonight, where I'm going to just be looking at the monitor. I'm tossing, I'm turning. But instead of me dreaming about whatever a 3-month-old baby is dreaming about, I'm going to find myself thinking about Schwellenbach and Sale. Okay, like that's the first thing on my mind. Tyler McGill, game 1. Okay, like those are the things that are going to be running in my head time and time again up until that game starts tomorrow. And then we'll be on the edge of our seats. I'll be shaking my leg more than I usually do, as it's one of the many tics I have, thanks to my good old friend ADHD. And I'm locked and ready to go, Anthony. This has been a wild ride, and in a very Metsian fashion. It's going to come down to the very last games. And while the MLB is doing nothing to really help the Mets in this situation, mind you, because while the Mets might not have to play that second game that we'll get into, knowing that there's no break, no turnaround, while everyone else has the advantage of that playoff break, stains, as JD Martinez put it lightly there in his post-game presser. So play to break down. I'm excited. Thank you so much for having me on as a guest. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And you can follow Wardy at Wardy NYM, as well as at the Wardy NYM for all of his great content. Make sure you're subscribing to him on YouTube, and make sure you like this video, subscribe here as well on Subway to Shea. We got 45 people in the room. I'm pretty sure a lot of people want to get in on the chat. Shout out to all of you people: Patty, Carlos, Raynell, Jeff Cohen, Carlos
Patty.
Ramos, Matt A.B. Ibanez from Till Mets Do Us Part in the house. Nice. Carlos Ortiz, Carlos Ramos, if I missed you there. Shea Parking Lot with the best, I don't want to say nostalgia room of all on Twitter. So shout out to all you guys. A lot to get into here. And, you know, the last time I went live, I usually do Sunday night shows at 9, doing it an hour earlier here. And we were coming off of such a high off of the end to that homestand with the New York Mets. And, man, when you talk about roller coasters, this week has been an absolute roller coaster from the Mets. They started off 2 games up on the Atlanta Braves, lost that first game. Weather, the typhoon, Hurricane Helene came through, and you know, they go to Milwaukee, which, you know, I knew coming in, and I don't know if you felt this way too. You know, that place also has kind of been that, you know, house of horrors for the New York Mets. So you knew coming right into this that this was not going to be easy. Everyone's, they made the playoffs. You know, they're going to take a break. They're going to relax. That's not how the Brewers run. And, you know, obviously with the help of Ramon de Jesus in game 1, significant. And I even saw you in the post game. I saw you start to, you know, boil up there during your post game show. Look, the fact that we are able to talk to all of you tonight with an opportunity to win a game and get into the playoffs after what has happened and transpired this week, I got to say is such a blessing that we're here at this point in this moment in time. What were your just like takeaways from this week just entirely? I know you guys talked about, I mean, you talked about it on, your channel as well, but just this whole thing that has gone on, this roller coaster ride that the Mets have taken us on.
It's expected. I mean, that's my biggest takeaway. Like, I never for a second did I think that anything would come easy for this Mets team. The same reason why anytime things are riding high throughout the course of summer, you have your more seasoned fans who have been through hell and back with the club saying all the same things. I love it, but I'm not buying in yet, And by time we finally do start to buy in is where we find ourselves in, predicaments like this, where the Mets are lifeless for 48 hours after dropping game 1 at Atlanta, a vital game 1, knowing that games 2 and 3 weren't going to happen when they were supposed to because of the hurricane coming to town. Wow, it's almost like we saw this coming for the past week plus. I wonder if anyone should have done something about it. I digress. So as we advance forward from Atlanta, as we get into this matchup against Milwaukee, it was, from the deja vus left to right and center, the stolen bags, the better defense, getting length from your starters when the Mets, for the first time basically since the first half of the season, were not getting consistent length from their starters. Just, it felt like the Mets were doing a complete turn back to March. It was very scary in that feeling and how similar it was and how much all the life was just completely lost from this organization. So I'd say collectively, a week as a whole, with the Mets having a couple of days off from the hurricane and everything, it was just as much of a roller coaster as you could expect. So I'm definitely happy with today's turnout. That we'll get into plenty. But yeah, this was another one of those weeks that I look back and I say, wow, I wonder why I have a condition. Yeah, that week late in September 2024, that didn't help the cause. That didn't help the heart health at all. It certainly doesn't, with all the stresses, with what felt like the Mets had everything aligned to get into playoffs, not comfortably, but not at the last dying second we now find ourselves in. That's where there's the biggest frustration, and that's why we are all still both anxious, excited, nerve-wracked, and every other emotion in between heading into this doubleheader.
Yeah, and I don't fault Met fans for feeling frustrated the way that they have. I mean, it's happened so many times in the past already. You can, like, they even played it 1998, the end of 98, 2007 and 8 and 2022 and how everything has played out, when it comes to the Atlanta Braves, where like they even had me for a second saying, wow, we started the season 0-5. Could we possibly end the season going 0-5? Thankfully, that's not going to happen because the Mets won on Sunday. But,
right.
You look at just what happened this week with the Braves. We even talk about Rhys Hoskins being that tormentor that he continues to be against the Mets. Thankfully, he didn't play Sunday, and that was very helpful.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why did today feel so good? And I realized Rhys wasn't playing. I'd be lying if I said that this isn't my first time realizing that, just because I was so anxious and locked in for the game. I didn't look at the Brewers lineup pregame. I did. There was no pregame work for me today like there has been previous days. So I was completely blind heading into it. And I just saw David Peterson shoving early. So I'm like, it doesn't matter who you're throwing up there. Even if Christian Yelich is healthy right now, he's striking out down away to David. So, yeah, fantastic game. But Rhys Hoskins, we appreciate him not playing, to say the least.
Yeah, thank you for taking the one day off and sparing us all the pain that was about to come. And, the Diamondbacks came out. They took care of business down there. Of course they were, right? Like, they weren't going to get swept by San Diego, and San Diego was throwing out C-team out there. Kansas City took care of business against the Braves. So now, we're kind of that three-way tie right now for the 2 spots left. But like you said, Mets are still alive here. All they got to do is win one game, and a huge thanks goes to probably the biggest pitching performance, not only for the Mets this season, but for this guy in particular, David Peterson. 7 innings pitched, 1 hit, no runs. I think he gave up 3 walks and struck out 9 batters. There's always that concern, maybe he's going to fall apart, after having that good start to the season. He was a linchpin this entire year for the Mets starting rotation, going 10-3 with a 2.90 ERA, 4th pitcher of this rotation to get to double digits wins this season. Just like David Cohen is saying, he was money today. What were your thoughts on what we saw from David Peterson? What did you like from his performance?
David Peterson showed not only a mental toughness, as my buddy Joe Sorallo would famously say in our previous show together, or, the sake of just looking at a gutsy outing, a high pressure, high leverage outing. The fact that it was David Peterson, the most inexperienced starter, not named Tyler McGill in this rotation, to trump Severino, to trump Minaya, and to trump Quintana, and, besting all three of them, out of the 4 total in their final starts of the year. That's the big takeaway, let alone like this is a Pearson who's had some rocky starts over the past month. He hasn't been sharp every time out there the way that he was for a good stretch when he first returned from injury back in June. So when you're getting David Pearson at his best, you're getting great outings where the strikeouts are up. He's finding himself 8 to 11 Ks. Shouldn't shock you with Peterson when he's really on and going. But when he's not going, then he will get rocked. And then you have more of that 4 or 5 inning outing where he was walking 3-4 guys maybe, and lower on the K rate. And what we saw from David Pearson today was not only his most impressive and most important start of the year, but his most important start of his career. Like this was without question the biggest start that we have seen David Pearson yet when it comes to certain leverage situations. And he went out there and stepped up in more ways than one for this Mets team. So yeah, simply put, I'm not only impressed with David Pearson's outing, but I'm so encouraged with how he goes about himself mentally in a matchup where the Mets, the whole reason why they look so much like they did back in March is because the Brewers, who haven't faced them pretty much since March, went out with the exact same attack plan. Steal bags early, have sharp defense, take advantage of bad fundies should have happened right away, which the Mets did in the first couple days, and have your strong pitching. And that's exactly what they got. So what did David Pearson do? Peterson, who's one of the best pitchers, not just southpaw starters, but best pitchers in Major League Baseball and picking off runners at first base, kept everyone there. And that was a difference maker right from the start. Chiriot was hesitant. We saw Terrain, who has 50 bags at least this year stolen, feels like half of them against the Mets. He wasn't running. This entire Brewers lineup, their whole MO was these more small fundamental baseball, and the Mets were able to crack down and beat them at their own game in this matchup. So Peterson was the plate setter and making that happen, cruising early and escaping that 2-on, 2-out jam. If it wasn't for that, the Mets may very well not go off to the start that they had this game with Lindor right away, and just the confidence, because not that starting pitching is everything, even though it certainly is in a lot of cases. You ideally want your starter to come out on the best foot possible. That way your offense is going to give it a chance to win early. And it's funny, as I'm saying this, I mentioned Joe Sorrello on MLB Network. Our guy Anthony Recker right now is live, so shout out Ant, one Ant to another, love them both. But yeah, final things I'll say on Peterson here is, he is so many different ways the big takeaway from this game. Mets don't win without him. I don't think they get close to winning because of how much he impacted right from the beginning to escape that jam and then retire basically every single batter he faced from thereafter.
I think what I like the most from this performance is we all knew once those 2 games got rained out that the pitching staff was going to be taxed this whole entire weekend, probably going through this wild card round if they make it that far, right?
Right.
You got the doubleheader Monday, and they're going straight to whether it's San Diego or Milwaukee, and they're going to play 3 games right away. So the fact that David Peterson came out, gave them 7 innings to allow the bullpen to rest. Now, I know a lot of people are going to talk about Maton coming in as well as Edwin Diaz, and we'll get your thoughts on that shortly. But the fact that Peterson came in, did his part, getting 7 innings, allowing the bullpen to get rest, because I'm pretty sure in one or not both games, we're going to be seeing guys like Jose Budo. We're going to be seeing everyone come out here. It's all hands on deck. These next 2 games. So the fact that you allow them to get this rest that was much needed, I think that's good. And I think that this team is well rested going into tomorrow, at least for the pitching staff wise, if need be. And if we get a great performance from McGill, or if we got to go to game 2 with Luis Severino and he bounces back, even better. But it's nice to see that Peterson get the job done and do what was required of him. Now, when I mentioned about Edwin Diaz, he came in today with the 5-0 lead. I know a lot of fans were not happy about him coming into this game because of tomorrow. Now, I was on the other side of that fence. I thought that it was the right move, considering he had not pitched since last Sunday in that final game. And he also did a 6-out save and a 4-out save in those 2 games against Philly. So having him come here, we all know that he struggles when he doesn't have repetition, I want to say. So having him come out today, I thought was huge because he's not going to come out for both games of the doubleheader. I guess if they need him, he will, but I don't see it being a possibility that he comes out for both doubleheader games unless necessary. And to have him, get this game, lock it down, get all the rust off. He was a little rusty today. You could tell he was a little rusty today. I think he had like 20 pitches. But seeing him come in, I thought that was important, not only for him, but to lock down this game because, you don't win today. We're not talking about really much tomorrow except for having to win 2 games of a doubleheader. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm in complete agreement with you. As soon as I saw that Edwin was getting the ball in his hands, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. And as soon as, Gary, Keith, and Ron talking on the broadcast, how the Mets need to focus on today. As much as we want Diaz available for the next couple of days, we need to make sure we're in a position where we're better than, say, God forbid, blowing this and losing this, being swept. If that were to happen, and we'd have ourselves a big, big problem there. The Mets, I'm almost certain, if they were swept, then they'd be cooked at this point, or just about. So to have Edwin Diaz come in after he hasn't pitched since Sunday was the best move that Mendoza could have done. Now you get that early rust off of him. Now, does this mean that if Edwin pitches in either of the games, if not both tomorrow, that he's going to be nails? No, it doesn't guarantee anything. So again, I'm going to preface now, God forbid, worst scenario, Edwin gives up a bomb to Ozuna or something. I'm telling you now, we've seen it before. These things shouldn't be shocking. They happen from time to time. But what also happens that is on a more consistent front is when Edwin Diaz gets more work, he thrives. He definitely has a problem, like many pitchers, where they have a good gap for when they're pitching to the next. And we cannot forget, for some fans I was interacting with postgame earlier saying, I didn't like Edwin out there. This is the same Edwin Diaz that recorded 10 outs in 24 hours less than a month ago. And we're talking about, is he going to be available tomorrow? He already said post-game that he's available for both games should the Mets acquire him. Hopefully they won't need a call for more than one. Just lock down game 1, God willing, and then, see what happens there in game 2 if it needs to be played. But that's my big takeaway. Edwin with the velo down, he topped out at 98.6. Not anything I'm concerned about whatsoever. This is the same Edwin that we've seen touch 101 plus this season. It wasn't long ago either. So yeah, Diaz, get the early rust off, and to do that also while allowing no more than just one runner to get on base. It's not like that we had ourselves that was a sweaty 9th inning. Edwin Diaz, we got the save, but he escaped bases loaded. No, that wasn't the situation, right? So all things considered, that was strong managing by Carlos Mendoza, and I think it sets him up well for at least one of the games over the next 24 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just I think that Carlos Mendoza, even though it's a learning process for him, for the most part this season has pushed all the right buttons when needed, especially when it comes to, even bringing JD Martinez back today. I thought he was just going to sit for the rest of the season. It brings JD Martinez back, and he had a big game for the Mets, doing what he did. Getting that big double, getting some scoring a run there. And, he has been able, Carlos Mendoza, that is, to kind of flip-flop this lineup. And I'm not usually a big fan of that. I always used to like that set lineup, like 2006 style, right? We'd have like Reyes,
what you're getting
Beltran.
every night.
Yeah, you know what you're getting every night, and they know their task. But the Mets, nowadays, it's always switching batters around. Will it work? Will it won't work? And for some reason this season, he has been able, whether it's, switch Lindor and Nimmo, put Iglesias in the 2-hole, the time he put Mark Vientos, and Mark Vientos went on that run in the 2-hole. Everything has just come out to work for Carlos Mendoza. And I got to give him kudos. If he does not get, and maybe Pat Murphy wins it, but if he does not get Manager of the Year consideration, I would be totally disappointed and shocked beyond belief, because he has been a really good manager this year. And I know a lot of people, there was a lot of the talk of the Craig Counsell and who would it be. And I always thought that, after Craig Counsell was gone, that Carlos Mendoza was the right choice. And I didn't even care that he came from the New York Yankees. I mean, they freaking win, So having that pedigree come over here, I'll take it. I think he's been great this season.
Yeah, all things considered, when we exclude some of the very frustrating games where bullpen management, it was micromanaged way too much where it shouldn't have been. I had a first-year manager for a guy that had a little experience heading into this. he's been stellar. And that's not only thanks to David Stearns setting him up beautifully, as David is a first-time hobo with the Mets, mind you, too. So they both deserve massive credit because this is first time out there for them to work as not only in this organization, but to work as a unit as well, where they're both new faces here. It's not like one's established in the organization, kind of knows how to break everything down. No, as Mendy was hired by David was probably touring Citi Field with him to figure out where was what. You know what I mean? Like, that's the crazy aspect about this. So Mendoza, not only is he deserving of, potential accolades for Manager of the Year, he's going to be heavily in that conversation. And if he doesn't win it, it will be because of Pat Murphy with the Milwaukee Brewers, who deserves endless credit for what he has done to maximize the value of this Brewers team, not only from their pitching, but to a lot of really young, talented guys, either in their rookie or sophomore seasons, that are just playing tremendous hard-nosed small ball. And that's really boded well. Murphy seems like a great manager for them. And he was a guy that the Mets considered playing in the past as well. So it's not like that they didn't understand that connection. David obviously did well. And isn't it bizarre, Anthony? This is what makes baseball so beautiful, because you have no clue what to expect, even when you think you have the writing on the wall. Back in the offseason, we lose out on one Craig Counsell. And who would have thought that all these months later, it's his replacement, and it's the guy that ended up being hired after Counsell denies the Mets that will be leading the charge in the managerial front for an award over Craig this season. Like, that too is just crazy to think about, but it really shows you how everything ended up working out in the end for everybody not named the Chicago Cubs. So I'm happy about that.
It's interesting to just look at all the guys. Like, we go through the offseason, who's going to be the Mets manager? Like, oh, we're looking into Pat Murphy. We're looking into Matt Quatraro, who's now going to the playoffs with Kansas City. What's the guy in Houston now? I can't remember his name, the manager in Houston.
Oh, Jorge Jose. Wait, I'm trying to think. Is it Jorge or Jose Espada? One of the two.
Jose Espada.
Yeah, and he's been denied by every managerial opening for like the past 5 years. Like 5 years. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's lack of experience or what, but for whatever reason, he was destined to be the heir apparent to Dusty Baker. And wow, color me shocked. The Astros, who had a really underwhelming first half, playing just like you'd expect here in the second half, winning the division again. Baseball's baseball.
Yeah. And that's without Justin Verlander's help this whole season. And,
nope.
Thankfully for us, we don't have to pay $17.5 million to him. That's out the window.
We have so much money off the books this offseason. It's going to be bananas. I'm going to be freaking on Soto watch until like February 25th, when he's been holding out so long. And then he signs with the Dodgers on a deferred contract of $800 million. I can't wait.
Well, the hope is we don't have to talk about this until November. I was on with Dexter Henry today, and then I did something with him yesterday. But I told him, I was like, I want to come back on Tuesday talking about and previewing this wild card series, and not talking about the top reasons why this Mets team did not make the playoffs this season. Like, I don't want that being my next content.
Right.
So this team definitely has to figure out a way to win one of these games and get into the playoffs. Now, I want to get into Francisco Lindor, because, man, the fact that he has come back, he had 2 hits on Friday. Today you could even tell laboring a little bit on the back, having to, running the bases and sliding at, having 2 stolen bases, sliding at home. You saw him crawling, but, he says he's okay. He says he's good to go. Hitting that home run was probably the icing on the cake. But for me, the fact that he stole 2 bases let me know that everything is okay for Francisco Lindor, even though he's probably going to be going through the pain. But, I mean, the guy, he's basically carried this team on his back, literally and physically.
Yeah. It's insane to see what Lindor has done this season, because in a lot of ways, this is expected. This is on par with his career norms. But when you truly understand and grasp the context of how the season began for him, where he didn't know that you're allowed to bat from the left side of the plate for the first month plus, he figured that out eventually, which is great. But it didn't begin at first. He went from being the worst batter in this Mets lineup in various ways for the first month and a half to being that, if it isn't for Francisco Lindor, this team is probably below 500 right now, or close to. Like, I firmly believe that, because of how much of a difference maker that he has been. It's not just the tremendous upside with his offense. It's shifting back into a role that he dominated with in Cleveland, that because of Beren and Nimmo, not that anyone was at fault there, because Nimmo's been a fantastic leadoff hitter for the Mets for a number of years, but the reality that things need to change. And let's give Lindor back in his most comfortable spot during all these years in Cleveland and leadoff. Let's give this thing a run, and the rest is history. He has been one of the best hitters in all Major League Baseball since that span. He's been the most valuable player, if you exclude, him missing injury for 10 days or so, which is definitely unfortunate. But there's just so many aspects to Lindor's game, from the leadership to leading that team meeting around the Jorge Lopez situation to just absolutely backing up. It's one thing to talk the talk; it's another to walk it. And that is a clear difference between a true leader in Francisco Lindor and what it means to be here and what it means to embody not only being a Met, but knowing that you're the big payday, you are the go-to guy, you're the guy that whether you like it or not, we're deferring to you to help lead the way. So are you going to be able to embrace that or not? We've seen players in recent years in New York fluctuate with embracing that. One that I think famously of is no longer a New York Knick, but now a Timberwolf, and Julius Randle. Julius, as he got started there with the Knicks, was the leader in charge when things weren't all that great around him. But then as things started to get better, he also was kind of fluctuating with how to handle being the guy or not. Lindor has handled being the guy, and now we have seen that. And that's something where we can really separate himself and Pete Alonso this season on how just glaringly different years that they have had for multiple reasons. Obvious ones, it has to do with the contract year more than anything. But if it isn't for Francisco Lindor, this team would be absolutely nowhere. So for that and for all the other reasons and all the other great things he has done over the years, I sincerely appreciate him every single day.
Well, I did have someone bring up the thumbs down to me on Twitter today. So people are, for some reason, people still have that on their mind from 4 years ago. I would hope that at this point in time that people would forget or at least let it go. But it's still on people's mind. But Francisco Lindor, I mean, look, 32 homers. He has 29 stolen bases, still has an opportunity to get 30-30 in these next two games. I'm pretty sure he'll be off and running if he gets on base to start this 2-game set with the Atlanta Braves.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. I'm so pumped up for this 2-game set in the sense that I'm anxious. I'm very emotional and manageable, as we stated, but to see Lindor have the game he just had, I know he didn't feel good. As soon as he stole second base, he didn't look overly comfortable. As soon as he landed there at home plate after Nimmo drove him in, he grimaced, and no pun intended because we got grimace right there, but he, had the back flare up. You can tell that Lindor is battling and he's fighting everything, but he is pushing all of those current pains aside because short-term pain means nothing to him with long-term success. And how do you get long-term success? It's about making playoffs and having yourself a run. He is doing everything in his power to lead the charge for this Mets team, even if it meant that he quite literally has a broken back from carrying the team all year and doing so. It's crazy, but it's a reality. That's why we appreciate him so much. And as we head into the series now against the Atlanta Braves, it's going to be pivotal to see Lindor continue to lead the way he did today, because it starts with him. They are getting on base, stealing a bag right away, 28th stolen bag, driven him later in the game. He would get on base, steal a bag, the home run as well, the RBI single, then the stolen bag, as I mentioned a second ago. Like it's all facets of the game, especially with Lindor not playing probably his most comfortable or best defense right now, given his injury. That's where the bat still needs to carry. And thankfully he's doing exactly that at the most important time.
We've gotten a little bit better situation out of Brandon Nimmo, especially in that homestand. He kind of that was kind of really his big week. Kind of struggled over the first couple of games. Got the Mets started with the RBI, a single in the first against Milwaukee. Him and Pete have been on such a weird path this second half of the season, and a lot of people said, why aren't people getting more on Nimmo? And you look at the stats. Nimmo batting over 300 with runners in scoring position. So he's getting big hits.
Yeah.
Even though he's struggling and is only batting 226, batting over 300 with runners in scoring position is huge. And that's why he has the RBIs that he has. So the thing is Pete Alonso has not had a good season, as all of us Met fans have watched him. Like, obviously the numbers are there, right? He has got over 30 home runs. He's close. I think he has 90 RBIs or a
it's
little
the
bit
fact
more.
that he's not even getting 40 bombs in a healthy 162.
Yeah.
Like, that cannot be understated for a guy that's in a walk year like this. He can't handle the pressure. It's as simple as that. There's no overlooking it or overthinking it either. It's right in front of you. He's made it loud and clear all year long. He denied the Mets last year, and he's already regretting it to a degree because while he's going to be looking for a bag, the Mets are going to be stubborn and probably sit right where they offered last year, if not less. Rightfully so.
Yeah. And he's batting, I think, a little over 200 with runners in scoring position. Still struggles with that slider on the outside or whatever breaking ball they throw on the outside to him. I don't care what has happened this entire season with Pete Alonso. He's got 2 games to get this thing right. I mean, I have been waiting and patient, waiting for this guy to turn it around. And it's just been a struggle with him. But he can change his own narrative by, having a big, even if it's just one game, getting this team into the playoffs. I don't care what he has to do. Get your bat going in a big spot because we desperately need it in these 2 games here.
Oh my God, yeah. And it goes without saying. This is the same Pete Alonso that I feel like we've been saying every week all season long. Now's the time. All right, Pete, now's the time. We've seen flashes. We definitely have seen flashes in the second half that we didn't even see in the first half. I agree wholeheartedly there. But that's a problem. It's always been flashes. He's never once had even a Nimmo type run where Nimmo, who's had an underwhelming season, had some fantastic stretches in the first half, especially going gap to gap on the home runs. I mean, I feel like every single Mets batter in this lineup, for the most part, has had at least one beautiful week of a stretch, if not 2. Whereas Alonso, you're probably finding at most a week, and that's it. And that just is not going to get the job done when he is supposed to be as pivotal and as important of a player in the lineup every single day as he is, batting in a premier position too. It's not like he's batting low in the order. The guy's batting basically 4th every single time out there. And on average, let's say every 2 out of 3 games, if not every 3 out of 4 games, you're getting very underwhelming play from Pete Alonso.
Yeah. And it's just become so frustrating too. But I guess to a certain extent, it really has made things easier for the Mets when it comes to this offseason. He has now, whether you want him on the team or not, I feel like he is not the biggest priority. He wasn't in the first place, right? Everyone probably is thinking Juan Soto, right? Like that's where you're putting all your chips and your money in on. But maybe we could bring him and Alonso, put them together. If Pete Alonso is like your big bat, return or acquisition, I think we're going to have a problem next season because, he's going to be on the other side of 30. And, this season has kind of been, I hope it's a one-off, but if it's not, it's kind of been a revelation to him not, like you said, not being able to handle big moments. And, we've seen Lindor able to do it. We've seen Nimmo do it. Glacius is a 20-game hitting streak. Mark Vientos has even had some big game-winning moments for this Met team this year. And it's upsetting to see Alonso not take part in that.
Yeah, it is, especially in a year where on paper, yes, the Mets have had a lot of trials and tribulations offensively, but on paper, they have had the best lineup that Pete Alonso's ever really had throughout his career. You can rightfully argue that, especially with the depth when looking at the power. And in a year where you have more power protection than ever, you do nothing with it. We don't need to go too long on a tangent, Pete Alonso, when we're trying to focus on, what's in front of us right now. But it's hard not to have this when you know that we ideally need to see Pete Alonso step the hell up the way that we saw Francisco Lindor, Francisco Alvarez, David Peterson, JD Martinez, Mark Vientos. Again, a good chunk of players today, all not named Pete Alonso. Like, that needs to change in itself, but that's been really a broken record all season long.
Yeah. And as Johnny Boy says, for me, it's Pete, coming up to bat and is supposed to be clutch, and he strikes out. It's so frustrating this year. It has been. It's been super frustrating. Because this is a guy we believe in. This is a guy that, we thought would kind of have a stellar year on his way out, right? We were talking about Judge money, right? Like at the beginning of the season, he's holding out for Judge money. And, Judge on his year had probably one of the best seasons of all time. And to see Pete flounder the opposite way, I didn't think he was going to have Judge here. But, not even to put up numbers that he's put up in the past. It's just Yeah, like I said, it's a little just disappointing. Disappointing. I expected more from Pete this year, but as we move on, with the show, just shout out to we got 843 people in this room.
Ooh, baby,
Woo.
we love
And
to see
shout out to
that.
all you people. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to Subway to Shea. Obviously, subscribe to Wardy as well. Got great content coming out on the daily. Post game, sometimes doing pre-game as well, and you got other videos that come out on a weekly basis as well. So make sure you're getting and absorbing all that content that Wardy's giving you.
I appreciate that. Very happy to have you all in here, guys. And if you haven't already, make sure to follow Anthony. He's going to be pumping out plenty of content, especially as we get in the thick of things now to end this Atlanta Braves series and hopefully head into postseason play. And hear his thoughts and hopefully some fun reactions and not too many depressing ones over the next couple of days would be certainly ideal. I'm not ready for the offseason talk, because I know that's what my entire life is going to consist of for a number of months. So please, boys, I beg of you, please, let's get something going here and let's have ourselves a nice little run.
Yeah, let's get into the wild card here. And like I said earlier at the start of the show, 3 teams, 2 spots. And here is how the stage is set here for what's going to be happening. Let me bring up this little screen here. There we go. SNY Mets put it out there. If the Mets defeat the Braves just once, as I said, 1 game left, they will clinch that playoff spot. If the Braves defeat the Mets, Atlanta will clinch a playoff spot. The Mets need obviously 1 game to secure that spot, and they can knock the Braves out of the playoffs if they sweep, and vice versa as well. If they split, they both make it. But if one of those 2 teams does a sweep, then Arizona gets their opportunity to come into the postseason. How do you feel about this, Wardy? How do you have this kind of playing out with Atlanta here? Because, man, it's easy to say, yeah, you just got to win that 1 game. But we all know that that's not easy at all.
The odds are completely against them for the following reasons. Reason number 1, we have to fly to Atlanta. Atlanta gets to stay in Atlanta. They don't have to worry about any travel. They can have themselves a nice, comfortable night when the Mets are going to have far from it, especially with a lot of guys, I'd imagine, and probably won't have best sleep tonight, knowing that their season is on the line tomorrow. So that's 1. Factor number 2, Atlanta not only solved you so well in game 1 of this series, but, exposed some vulnerabilities of the team that I think were further exposed to a degree from the Brewers that we haven't seen as much as of late here in the past month plus. So that's not ideal. And those are things that go against them. And number 3, most importantly, you could rightfully argue, are those pitching matchups. It's one thing to potentially face Chris Sale, where it's not a guarantee if the Mets especially take game 1, then Sale, if the Mets take game 1, then Sale will pitch. But if the Mets lose game 1, Sale ain't going to pitch. It's more than likely going to be a bullpen game for Atlanta where they can have Sale then set up to begin the wild card against whoever it's going to be. But for the Mets here, the big bugaboo is that Schwellenbach, this kid has been such a pain in the neck for the team in the 2 starts, and I cannot emphasize this enough. I will reiterate it once more. I'm hoping by speaking these numbers more into existence, it helps the Mets finally grasp how to handle him and his slider, because they have nothing to show for it right now. That splitter was nasty. Let's take it back to July 27th, right? Mets face Schwellenbach. Funny enough, is the exact head-to-head matchup we're going to be having tomorrow for game 1. It was Tyler McGill versus Schwellenbach. McGill got rocked big time by the Braves, sadly, at home. And Schwellenbach decided to go at least 7 shutty, allowing just a hit or 2. And we're looking at 11 strikeouts. Fast forward now over this past week when the Mets were in Atlanta before the hurricane came crashing down. 5-1 win for the Braves, 7 innings, 1 earned run, 4 strikeouts for Schwellenbach. So K count was down. Mets were working counts a little bit more, but they were not able to get anything going for the most part. He had their numbers. So 3rd time's a charm for this Mets team, God willing. That's what we're hoping for right now. But that is where I'm most concerned, is the pitching matchups, obviously, and knowing that the Mets have such a short turnaround, whereas Atlanta has a clear advantage. They might not be the better team on paper per se, given all their injuries, you could argue. But when it comes to facing the Mets, this Atlanta team always knows how to turn it on, especially in high-pressure cooker situations. And it's going to probably be a sold-out crowd, even for a doubleheader tomorrow. Yeah, this is going to be a tough challenge for this Mets team. And that's why They have to. It is so vital for them to not only get out early, but to make sure they avoid some of the defensive miscues they had in game one, where Tyrone Taylor is falling short there of a diving ball in center field, or you're seeing other guys, even in years past, Mark Hanna lose a ball in the lights in left field. We've seen a lot of bad fundies happen either because of the devil magic that's going on at Atlanta or what, but that needs to change. And hopefully with Tyler McGill, we get a Tyler McGill that isn't the one that we saw earlier. Things have changed since then, which is great. But I do have a level of concern there also just because you don't know how much length you're getting in McGill. Whereas Severino, yes, he got rocked last time around, but even when he gets rocked, more often than not, he's still able to provide length for this Mets team. So that's going to be a big question for McGill to see how he fares against Schwellenbach to right the wrong from the last time they matched up in late July.
We got a Braves fan in the house here, Cody, saying, let's just set our differences aside and scratch each other's back tomorrow. I guess giving one game each so they could just eliminate the Arizona Diamondbacks. I mean, I would, I feel like that's kind of set up for that. I don't know. Just the way the pitching matchups are set up right now. Are you okay the way that they set them up, knowing what we know? Like, obviously, Sale and Sevy going in game 2 because of the fact that if either team wins game 1, obviously they're not going to pitch. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a switcheroo here, and then they're going to have them rest and go game 1 of the wild card series. Now, for me, I think that it's super important for the Mets to win game 1. Obviously, it gets them into the playoffs, but it messes with the Braves here because now the Braves are taken out of using both Schwellenbach and Chris Sale in the wild card round. So you really want to take game 1. Both teams really want to take game 1. It would be perfect for the Mets to be able to push back Sevy an extra day and even push back Sean Manaea, who I think would be pitching on maybe 3 days rest, maybe 3 or 4 days rest. It won't be a full rest.
Yeah,
if pitches game 1.
Yeah, if Sean pitches game 1, I think he's short of rest by a day. It shouldn't be more than that, though. And that's a big question, too, with how Manaea would perform. But I'm not even worried about that. We just got to make playoffs first, right? So to piggyback off of what you were saying about, Sale and these matchups, me personally, I don't love McGill going game 1. And the reason why I don't love McGill going game 1 is, yes, I understand the counters. Severino didn't look good last time he was in Atlanta. That was a week ago. So expect more of the same, right? Well, this is a righty-heavy lineup of the Atlanta Braves that I firmly believe if Sevy didn't have that throwing error, thanks to Alvarez getting his way in the third inning, it wouldn't have spiraled the way that it did. Obviously, that doesn't account for other factors that simply led him to throwing meatballs and just not having a good start in general. But Severino's the veteran. He's a guy I trust more. I have more reliability with. And to put McGill in that position, and let's say we talk about the positives if the Mets win game 1, right? Then you don't have to use Sevy. He's good for wild card, all that stuff. Sweet, great, dandy, cool. If the Mets lose game 1 and McGill gets rocked early and you use 6 pitchers in the game, how do you think that sets yourself up then for a game 2? Where, yes, for the Mets, they won't have to face Chris Sale. That is a plus. And they will have to utilize Sevy more than likely. But it's still not a position you want to put yourself in because then your back is against the wall more than ever. So I see both sides of the coin here, and I understand Mendoza's forward thinking while also saying, hey, I know Schwellenbach has done very well against us, but we did just face him. So the same way that the Braves were thinking that if they face Severino again, that they're going to rock him again is the same way the Mets feel, okay, we know Schwellenbach. We just saw him. We know how we're going to attack him this time. We're going to get off that rust. Disregard what happened in July as well fast forward. We need to see him again. And now we're really going to have our game plan attack and make sure that we're not fishing down away at some of his pitches that he's going to have with his slider especially. So if they go out there with that mentality, then again, I understand that. That makes sense, right? But simply put, I don't love either situation. None of this is comfortable for me. It's very uncomfortable to break it down, if I'm being quite frank, because no route do I look at, oh, this is a clear avenue for the Mets, right? I love it. Nothing about what is happening from now up until the end of tomorrow. I don't want to say not excited because I am, but I'm not like nervous or anxious about.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate these, what the pitching matchups are tomorrow, because G Money Stacks is asking here. We know that Tyler McGill will go in game 1 against Spencer Schwellenbach, And then what's supposed to be game 2 is Chris Sale versus Luis Severino. But I assume that whichever team wins will probably change that decision. I would assume, from Mendy's point of view, that maybe he feels that, like you said, right? Sevy is the more veteran, mentally tough guy. To have the fate of the Mets postseason opportunity in his hands, for me, makes more sense than it all coming down to if Tyler McGill can give us the best outing of his life. Like I understand kind of the switcheroo there, but I've always been like you: win the game at hand, worry about tomorrow then. But I think for this, especially with the fact that they're playing all these games in all these days, you can't bring back Minaya to pitch this game. Quintana's done. David Peterson is, probably out until Thursday or Friday. So this route, I'm actually not upset about. It might not work. That it just happens. But like I am not upset the way that they have kind of stacked these two.
Final thing I'll say on this, because again, I'm not overly stubborn one way or the other. I just personally thought Severino made more sense. I will say this: if Chris Sale was starting game 1, I think without question Sevy starting game 1. So this is very much of like, okay, we're going to play this chess match. So if you're throwing out your ace caliber starter, we're going to throw out what is on paper our best between our current options, right? So I think by the Braves having a willingness to not pitch Chris Sale in game 2, should they win game 1, also goes in hand with that decision, knowing that on paper, at least the Mets should have the superior pitching matchup, should they have to do it, and then they can kind of go from there. So again, either way, it's not sexy. There's nothing overly pretty about it. There's nothing that's not going to make you overthink a little bit, given our options at the moment. But that's just the predicament that the Mets are in. So all they can do now is control their destiny like they have been all season long, right? Give us a reason to be pumped up, get us all amped up. We're all going to be anxious as all hell from start to finish tomorrow. So just give us good, hard-nosed, entertained baseball. At the end of the day, win or lose, as much as I pray to God that they clinch and they're in, I just want to see them show up, because I'm mostly disheartened than ever. That's where you see me literally get tomato-faced, almost purple-faced, is simply when the team has nothing to show from top to bottom, from pitching to defense to the offense. It's one thing when you don't have one thing. It's another when you don't have all three. You can't expect a semi-irrational fan like myself on the day-by-day to handle that, right? So just go out, play your game. Don't play the nonsense that the Braves and the Brewers and their freaking voodoo magic would love you to play over the next couple games.
Yeah, I definitely want to see Lindor kind of set the tone like he did today.
Right.
And, let everyone know it's okay. We got this, because that's what it felt like. Lindor set the tone, got on base, stole the base, came around to score, and it felt like everything got loose from there. So I hope that we see that coming around. We talk so much about the pitching, but this lineup that's coming with the Mets, I know they haven't been like this all year. Man, there's got to be some type of patience when it comes to facing these Atlanta Braves pitchers from this group here. And I don't know how they want to set up things defensively. But for me, I kind of want
Schwellenbach, not to cut you off real quick.
Yeah, no.
Because we were first pitch swinging at everything, like literally everything. I'm like, what are you doing, Jesse Winker? This should be a perfect matchup. Your first pitch, everything. It just, that pissed me off. All right, go back.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no. I 100% agree. I don't know how we set this lineup up. Is it more, offensive? Do you bring JD Martinez back out there? He'll probably play 1 or 2 games, but does he start that first game, or do you bring him back for the second one? I'm always by the mind that I want a more defensive group out there.
Right.
Put, Francisco Alvarez, make him the DH, get Luis Torrens in there, because, I don't want bases to be stolen against this team. It has not been let's be honest. It has not been a good year for Francisco Alvarez behind the plate, outside of calling a game, which I think he's fantastic at.
Yes,
but
you're right.
Too many pass balls, too much bad defense from him, and too many stolen bases. And to have Luis Torrens, be catching, and then, Alvarez in that DH position for at least one of the games, I think makes the most sense to me. and to throw out maybe Bader and Tyrone Taylor should be playing both games. I mean, he should be out there for this.
He won't, but he should
won't
be.
probably,
Yes.
but he should be. I mean, seeing Starling Marte, play defense worries me. I know
in
Bader's
Atlanta. Yeah, it really worries me. It doesn't look good.
We saw it on Tuesday. I mean,
Yep.
he just was struggling out there. Even with that catch that he made, it should not have been that hard for him, but he made it. He made it a fun time to watch out there.
Yeah, no, it's like if you're the casual viewer and say you just turn on the TV and you just saw the end of the catch, oh, stellar catch by Starling Marte. But then when you realize that was just him completely mismanaging where he was supposed to be for that ball, then you're like, okay, thank God he caught that, or that's another boneheaded play by Starling and Wright.
Yeah, I don't know how to really set this group up because they've just not done well against either of these pitchers. So it's just throwing, darts at the board here. But like, what do you want to see from this lineup? How do you want to configure these guys tomorrow?
Okay, so for Schwellenbach, this is how I'm going to answer that question. We're going to go to our little friends at Baseball Savant, and we're going to go back to last week. What was it? Last Monday, the Mets game, or was it Tuesday? It was Tuesday. The Mets lost that game 5-1. Let's take a look at how the Mets lineup was against Schwellenbach then, and see how they should properly adjust now. Because there we go. Taking forever to load. Bingo, bingo, bingo. Okay, so Mets lineup where they got shut down by Schwellenbach again. 7 innings of 3-hit, 1-run baseball, 4 Ks. They had this is without Lindor back, so something to bear in mind. So having Lindor back will be huge. So they had Iglesias batting leadoff, Nimmo, Marte, Alonso, Winker, Vientos, Taylor, Alvarez, and Acuna. The Mets' glaring holes in the lineup was Nimmo down to Winker. All of them couldn't hit a lick whatsoever. Vientos, just like he did today, had himself a multi-hit game in this one. No one else was showing up, had the home run too. So I think you go about the lineup here as follows. As long as Lindor can handle it, or we know he won't be a defensive liability, we'll see how that quick turnaround is to a day game tomorrow. So if Lindor's at short, okay, you're going to have Lindor batting leadoff, obviously. Going to put Jose Iglesias in that 2-hole. He's been looking very nice. I think you keep him higher in the order here. Then at 3, this is where you can go various routes, and whether you want to go down Mark Vientos or if you want to have him lower in the lineup, that one is basically up to you. Alonso, you're going to keep in the 4 spot and hope for the best, even though it's going to be up to him. So I don't have high expectations, sadly, right now. Then this is where things get interesting because Jesse Winker had a piss poor game against Schwellenbach, but I know he's supposed to be better. Like the matchup is in favor of him, and I firmly believe that, and I'll stand on it actually. So I want to see Jesse Winker back in this Mets lineup because I know for a fact the Mets are not going to play both Alvarez and Terens in the same game to start, knowing they may have to play both games. Even if that seems like it's the best route on paper, which I don't disagree with you there, I don't think they're going down that route. So that's where you enter Winker here. So you want to put Jesse at DH again, but maybe move Jesse a little bit down. Maybe you want Mark batting 5th. Maybe you want Jesse batting 6th instead. Then 7th, you can have yourself your Tyrone Taylor. 8th, you can have there and Louis Terens, if not 9th, or then you want to flip-flop, and then you go about things. Nimmo obviously would be high in the order. I'd imagine you have probably Nimmo there batting right around the 3-hole or so. So that's the lineup configuration I would go with. I think Jesse should go back out there. I know that he didn't look great that we saw over the past couple of games, but he has a flair for the dramatic. He's had some massive clutch hits, not as much with the Mets as he did with the Nationals, a more increased role there, but there's something about Jesse Winker that I really feel is going to ball out. And it ain't going to be against Chris Sale if we face Chris Sale because he ain't going to face the lefty. So it's got to be game 1, if not potentially in a bullpen game in game 2. So any further thoughts you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, hey, man, big time Jesse Winker game. I'm here for it. He's had a rough September. He really has. But
I'm trying to speak it into existence. I really am.
Yeah, he's had a rough September, but for the most part, I thought he's been a pretty solid addition for this team during their big run, had that big game-winning home run in August. So let's see if he could turn it around. I'd put him up against Schwellenbach since he's the righty going in, and then, maybe have JD Martinez go up against Chris Sale and see if his bat can, catch a little lightning like it did on Sunday. Carlos Ortiz says that they should keep the lineup the same way as it is today. It's a quite possibility since they scored 5 runs, but they also left a lot of guys on base. Something that's been big for this team all year, unfortunately. But we'll see what they do. We'll see how this lineup comes out. We know that Lindor seems to be doing all right. Iglesias has been just fantastic all season long. And to have the big hitting streak that he's had has been, just awesome to see. Ibby saying, I need this team to dig deep and stop playing scared in Atlanta. Know that you belong and win. Stanley Babbage saying Mets control their own destiny. And Jeff Cohen channeling Tug McGraw. You gotta believe. The Mets do. I mean, I got my shirt on. I got my Believe shirt on. I don't know. You see that?
There you go. The Disney themed. Very nice.
That Athlete Logos. Our guy Athlete Logos. Shout out to him.
Oh, he's awesome.
All the stuff that he does, fantastic. But before we wrap up here, Wardy, any final notes from you heading into tomorrow? How are you feeling? How you think this is gonna end up for the New York Mets?
Just normal Mets fan me says Mets have their thing figured out game 2. So that's meaning we're going to drop game 1. I hope that isn't the case, obviously. That just, I think, can go in hand with not only the Schwallenbach matchup, but also because you have the short turnaround from Milwaukee to Atlanta, and it's an early day game. You know what I mean? Like, there's just all those factors do not line up well for the Mets, theoretically at least, to get off and running. Now, could they? Sure. They got off running today when they've been god-awful in day games on Sundays, right? They've been the past 2 months, at least for the most part. So that was a nice step in the right direction, but I'm going to go with the mentality that we're going to have that game 2, and it's going to be important until proven otherwise. So for the Mets, go out there, give it your all. You have nothing to lose. I want to see them play a lot like they did today in the sense of their aggressiveness on the base pass. Need to start early. That's huge. Set the tone, because we have seen how well teams like the Brewers and others can make you pay early and often, and you just don't have time to properly adjust, so you don't know what to do. I think of the Tampa Bay Rays game all the time when everyone and their mother ran on Jose Quintana, where he gave up like 8 earned runs in like 2 innings. And why? It was because they were just running amok on him, and we had no recipe for it. So I think with the Mets need to continue to play the game that they haven't as strongly played as of late, because it's clearly leading to success, and it's going to throw off the opposing teams here. I think Milwaukee was a bit thrown off by the Mets' aggressive approach today. Very different than their passive approach the previous 2 games, right? You expected desperation, but it's another one you're doing at a quality rate. They didn't look like that they were frantic and things were just working in small ball. No, they looked calm, cool, and collected in this one from the start. Have that mentality, have that focus heading into game 1 against the Atlanta Braves. And everything they saw with Schwallenbach, I hope everyone that's been on the flight, if they're actively on it right now or whatever's going on with the travel situation, watch as much film as possible, just like Lindor is, and make sure you have a proper approach. I better not see the same nonsense against Schwallenbach again tomorrow, because if then again, the Mets, rightfully so, probably don't deserve to advance from there. You know what I mean? You need to at least show up. That is my big takeaway. Show up, and good things tend to happen. And just don't get flustered. If you have an error, if something happens, settle down. The fans are going to be roaring. It's going to be sold out there, I'm sure. Everything is going to be up against you. That's why you need to be calm, cool, and collected, and have the mentality that you had when you were playing loose, great baseball this year. I understand it's hard to play loose in a situation like this, but you also need to bear that in mind with how you've played your best baseball this year. The best offense we've seen from the Mets this year came back in June when no one was giving a shit about them and when no one thought that they were going to rally to even get to 500. They need to try to dig deep and find themselves in a similar mentality, while also knowing that we just got to play at a faster pace. So play loose, but play fast and have fun. That all those things are important, and hopefully they'll find themselves successful, and we are going to have ourselves a playoff discussion after Monday. So God willing, fingers crossed. That's what I got to say about tomorrow.
This doubleheader will separate the contenders from the pretenders. And that's not just the teams. We're talking about the players in this roster, in this Mets team. I want to see what we have seen all season long from this team, and that is resilience. It's a different year for what we've seen from this New York Mets team. Going down 0-5 to start the season, having that awful May, and figuring out a way to come out of it. I want this to be different than 1998 and 99 and 2007 and 2000. The list goes on and on. 2022. I want this to be a different. I want to talk about on Tuesday a preview for this wild card round. And if they get bounced in the wild card, well, so be it. What this team has gone through this whole year just to get to this day, just to get to this doubleheader. cannot be understated. The OMG, grimace. You could talk about all the outside stuff, but this team has worked hard. This team has played hard. They have really gotten to the manager in Carlos Mendoza, really took to him, as well as they believed in the stuff that David Stearns was saying all the way from the beginning. And it's time. It's time for this team to overcome these demons, even if it means just getting the one win against Atlanta. Just get in to the postseason. And that's what I would like to see from this team. Resilience to end the year. Wardy, before we wrap up here, let us know, what you got going on over the next day and a half for this content creation that's going to be going on. I'm pretty sure we're all going to be in on it the next day or so.
Yeah, we're all going to be locked in, to say the least. Hey, you guys can check me out on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts for post-game coverage after the conclusion of every single game. Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube. I probably won't be live on X, but that will be something you'll see me doing potentially again in postseason play should the Mets crack it heading into the offseason. I may have a watch party tomorrow. I'm still figuring that out just because it's such a quick turnaround tomorrow. And I also don't know how available I'll be able to be with the little ones. So I got to balance that and figure that out. So I'll be doing that. But at minimum, you guys will definitely be getting post-game coverage from me. If not after both games, then after the second game, should it happen, for a huge recap and conclusion of either the Mets season ending, and that's that, and we had an off season, or talking about postseason play. So that's where you guys can catch me at Wardy NYM. Anthony, always a pleasure. Very happy that we got to chop it up right before this vital, end to this regular season. We haven't talked in a minute now, so I think this was a nice little, refresher, and also an anxious one for sure. But it's always good to chop it up with fellow talking heads like yourself. They kind of help ease the mind for me, so that way I'm not too stuck in my own damn thoughts every single day the way that I am about this team. I love interacting with everybody, but as soon as I'm done and like I'm winding down for the night, I'm just in there the whole time like this needs to happen, that needs to happen, that. You help calm me down a little bit, Anthony, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's what I'm here for. That's the sole purpose, was just to make sure everything is good for Met fans. We got to stay positive going into tomorrow. Like I said, be resilient. For me, I'm going to try to do a show tomorrow night once this is all said and done, whether they win, whether they lose, sometime around 9 p.m. Come check out Subway to Shea. Come join on. I would assume that they're going to try to get this doubleheaders out like that, because one of these teams is flying to, whether it's San Diego or Milwaukee, or maybe they're both flying. Who knows? There
will be a half-hour break probably in between, and then on to game 2. So imagine game 2 will probably start 3:34.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's probably more leaning 4 then, because you got to have that half-hour break. But if the Mets play like a 2.5-hour game tomorrow, there you go. 4 o'clock will be your game 2.
Yep. So then catch me at 9 p.m. I'll try to have a guest on for that as well. We'll either be trying to calm everyone down, either in excitement or, disappointment, but hopefully it's, the first part. But that's going to wrap it up for the Subway to Shea podcast. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea, as well as me personally at Ant Rivera 86. Subscribe to the Subway to Shea podcast for the audio version on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, which you can catch either tomorrow morning or shortly after this. I got to edit it, so that takes time, but you can catch this on YouTube as well. If you missed most of the show, just click on play, watch it again, and subscribe. 1,018 people in here. Can't thank you enough for joining us, joining me and Wardy. I'd like to shout out everybody by name, but that's a lot of people. But thank
Jamie,
you all for
Alex,
tuning in.
and Alexander, Matthew, Steven.
Just gonna start naming people, just names in the book. But thank you so much, everybody. This has been a fun show to do. It's always fun chopping it up with Wardy. You enjoy tomorrow's games. Let's go Mets. You gotta believe.
You gotta believe. Peace out, everybody.